Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As I always say, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all of the support, all of the messages, all of the emails that you've sent me, all of the things that you've sent to the show. Love hearing from you guys. Love hearing about all the suggestions you guys have, and really excited to bring this one to you guys because I think it's becoming more and more prevalent, at least for me at the high school level, this concept of using stats and charting things and creating advantages based off of the stats that you see. I feel like with the access that we as coaches have nowadays to apps and programs that can stat and chart things, I feel like our ability to really know the ins and outs of our team and others' teams is higher than it ever has been before. So I think this is a real cool topic to talk about with my guest, who's going to kind of talk about the way that he uses stats, the stats that he measures, the ones that are important to him, having those conversations with players and how he kind of integrates statistics into those, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm sure we'll get into as well. So without further ado, I'm very happy to be joined by the women's coach at Bakersfield College. Joining me today is Coach Grant Bingham. Coach, again, really appreciate you being able to carve out some time to talk to us. How you doing today?
Yeah, good. Thanks so much again for reaching out and let me be a part of this.
Absolutely. Coach, let's go ahead and get started with you. And where has this game of basketball taken you? Where's your coaching journey taken you? And ultimately, how'd you end up at Bakersfield?
Yeah, so kind of full circle. I'm actually born and raised in Bakersfield, California, and so it was nice to be able to make it back to this spot. My journey's been it's been I'm going to say a long one because I definitely know that I'm still on the younger side, or at least I like to claim that I am. But originally I started out coaching high school, so we coached 6 years at the high school level here in Bakersfield. And we were really fortunate enough to have a good team. We won our section championship 3 years in a row, made a lot of deep state runs. We had a lot of high level athletes on the team, and I knew that I wanted to be into coaching, but it wasn't until getting our program the way it was, and kind of diving into the college coaching world, that I was like, all right, man, this is what I want to do. And so then ultimately from there, after high school, I did 1 year. I was actually assistant coach at Bakersfield College, my first year there, first week of practice, my head coach went down with a torn Achilles, and so all of a sudden, where I thought I was going to just kind of be in that second chair mode, it turned into me as the acting head coach for a few months of that first season.
Wow.
So, but again, all things happen for a reason, and so that also kind of put me in a spot to tell myself, okay, I can do this, and this is what I want to do. And from that point in time, I told myself, all right, I want to be as ready as I possibly can when this job opens back up, and try to taste and get a feel for everything I could. And so from there, I left to go coach NAIA basketball. So I did 2 years up at Simpson University, which is in Northern California. And then from there, I went ahead and I took a full-time assistant coach job out in College of Idaho, just outside of Boise, Idaho, and Caldwell. And that was a fantastic job. It's NAI, but man, there's a lot of high level basketball out in the Cascade Conference, both men and women's side. So it's really fun to be a part of and see and And then from there, home called again, and I was offered a position to coach with Greg McCall out at Cal State Bakersfield, the Division 1 in the Big West Conference. So I assistant coached out there for a couple of years, and then this head coach job came available at Bakersfield College, like I'd been waiting for, and time was right to take it, and here we are.
And how cool is that though for it to come like full circle like that? Like you said, was that
Yeah.
something that you were always, like secretly hoping was gonna open up? Was it something that you're like, ah, if it happens, it happens, but not gonna like wait on it? Like what was that kind of thought process about being able to return to Bakersfield?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, it's a great spot. I mean, it's a no shame plug for what I've got to offer. You know what I mean? We have tremendous resources, great campus, a ton of support from our administration, and I know, and obviously being from Bakersfield originally, I knew what was there, and so yeah, I mean, patiently waiting for that job to open up. The previous coach before me, she coached there for 27 years. So it was a
Wow.
solid career there, and so I just kind of was patiently waiting. And and ultimately, in this career field, you never know what's going to happen year to year, and so like I said, I just wanted to kind of put myself in a position to experience as much and have a ton on the resume that was going to be either something that I loved and wanted to continue to stay at, or if this job came open, then I was going to be a hard candidate to turn down. And so ultimately, that's what came about, and so here we are trying to get this program up and going.
Oh, great when like it seems like the stars align like that, right? Where everything kind of comes together.
Yeah, 100%. It's worked out great, and especially in the college ranks of coaching, the fact of you being able to go from one position to another and not have to move is pretty nice, especially on the West Coast, just because there's so far few schools, and so it's especially if you're a West Coast college coach. I mean, we're pretty much got it in our minds that a move is almost necessary. And so when you don't have to, and it's in your hometown, hard to beat that for sure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Speaking on that, Coach, I did want to talk about, the experience that you've had coaching at different levels,
Yeah,
obviously different kind of areas of the country as well. So
yeah,
your coaching journey has taken you to where you have had a lot of exposure to athletes at all sorts of different levels. So I
yeah.
was curious for you about what are some of the coaching practices of yours that have consistently worked well, and what are those things that you've really just sort of maintained in your coaching repertoire, regardless of what level you were coaching at?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the big key thing. I mean, from high school to JUCO to NAI to Division 1 and all that in between. I mean, I was honestly fortunate to go the path I did, just because each one of those levels contains so many different aspects, whether it's the coaching piece, whether it's the program, right, like resources and figuring out, okay, hey, I want to do these type of skill workouts, but what do we have to work with? You know what I mean? Am I grabbing to the point of grabbing a trash can from the side of the gym to actually having pop-ups and a shooting machine and all those different
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like, so for myself in my career, I mean, I got to witness having nothing and having everything. And so I think with that, the truth of the matter is that whether I was coaching high school or whether I was coaching Division 1, the kids that are ready to come in the gym and work, your workouts and your practices, it's not like we're doing anything crazy different, right? Like you might hear that sometimes from some coaches. I mean, you're still going to do your weave drills and your you know coming off pick and rolls and stuff, but it's just depending on the level that you're at, it's you're working on a little bit more minute details and faster tempo and learning to make different reads, right? So whether we're working with my high school athletes, and just teaching the proper fundamentals I'll just stick with pick and rolls, right? Like learning the fundamentals of how do you properly come off of a pick, you know what I mean, or how do you set a proper pick versus now you're getting to the Division 1 level where most of the time they already know that fundamental or have that fundamental, but now it's okay. Now after we're coming off that pick, now we're learning to do this move and that move or so different situations,
Right.
right? And so that's where I'd say like the biggest thing it was just having just that high energy, kind of high tempo, increasing that right at each level, and just but no matter what, it didn't matter if we were doing a simple drill to a team concept. The biggest thing that works well is just the competitiveness, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we want to make sure that our girls are getting after it, and going to the level that we need it to be. And so, our goal, especially like, for example, with our staff here now, we preach about the fact that our practices are harder than the game, right? You've heard it.
Games, yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah, I heard a lot of that, right? And so, that's the part where it doesn't matter. And so, kind of the other thing too that I didn't necessarily mention, but was a piece of my journey. I mean, we talk. I had an opportunity kind of early in my career. I got to help out a lot with the USA basketball and the junior national teams and the national teams, and just from a support staff standpoint, but you still get an opportunity to kind of work with the players and work with the coaches and stuff like that. And it's the same thing. It is the same box out drills that I was doing with my high school team was the exact same box out drill
Wow.
that Coach Pop was having those guys do. And so that kind of makes you feel a little bit better, like, okay, all right, it's just about managing of increasing the tempo, increasing the calls and things like that. So
Yeah, but that's cool to hear that, like, regardless of what level you're at or what age group you're working at, like, I feel like every group, even if it's a group of 5-year-olds or group of 15-year-olds, group of
yeah,
20-year-olds, they all like love to compete in their own way. They all love
exactly.
like getting after each other, competing and winning. And it's just, I feel that, so many of the successful coaches that I talk to and the ones who you could just tell are, super passionate about, what they're doing and how they're coaching. Like they just love having those like competitive practices or those environments where those
Oh yeah,
practices are, as you said, right, more difficult than the games are. And I think that, players of all ages, really love those sort of environments where they really feel like they're, getting a lot of good work in when they're there in the gym.
definitely. No, 100%.
As we shift to talking about using statistics to create advantages, Coach, let's kind of start with what are the statistics for you as a coach that are most important to you? So what are they? And
Yeah.
we'll start with what they are and why are those particular stats of importance to you?
Yeah. So the biggest one for me, number one for me, that was easiest to always answer that question, is rebounding. I'm a huge rebounding coach. I know before we kind of started talking, I told you about my point guard again. She's a uh, 5 footer. She's probably gonna elbow me in the gut right now to tell me if give her at least 5'1", 5'2". But she's a 5 footer, and again in our conference, she averaged nearly 4 rebounds a game, and so that just goes to show you that I don't care if you're 5 foot or if you're 6'5". Rebounding is huge for me. And honestly, most especially on the women's side. I think it's a big statistic that we focus on. So rebounding is the easy answer. Specifically in it, we'll talk about total rebounds, and then also. We focus a lot on offensive rebounds, both offensively and defensively. So it's the umbrella, right, is rebounding, but then I break that down between almost 4 categories right there between the total rebounds, offensive rebounds, and then specifically offensively for us O boards, right, and then for the other team defensively, right, how many O boards have we given up there?
Give it up. Yeah.
And so that's probably number one. Then the next, then the next part of it, we look at, as we come into halftime, post game. We look at free throw attempts. So for us, we want to make sure that we increase that number. That just means that we're being aggressive. That means we're getting to the line, giving ourselves opportunities. That's kind of something that we preach a lot. We attack the basket pretty heavily, and then the next part of it, we're a high tempo, kind of in your face a little bit defensive team. And so deflections and charges are big for us, right? So we talk about, we want to get as many deflections as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And then that ultimately leads to a lot of times, if we're going to be high up in the passing lane, then your first action against us is going to go ahead and try to backdoor us. And then that's where we set up with our help side, in a charge opportunity. And so that's kind of, those are the big five ones, five categories that we really kind of focus on. And then of course, from there we break it down even more, but as a whole, that's kind of what we're looking at.
And were these categories always something that were a part of what
Yeah.
was important to you in your coaching identity? Or these things that have kind of developed over time based on your coaching experience? How did these ones come into the fold as like, okay, these are definitely the ones that are the ones that I find to be the most important?
Yeah, so rebounding has always been probably number one
Mm-hmm.
for me. Even when I was at the high school level, we statted absolutely everything. I was always making sure that if I wasn't live statting, then I was immediately after the game trying to watch film and stat, so that way we could go in the next day and be able to talk numbers. So rebounding wise, the biggest thing that I found in my career, again, this is almost more specific. It's more specific on the women's side, but still applicable on the men's side as well to some extent. But on the women's side, what I found is that as I charted these and looked at the games, our biggest thing was as we got 50 rebounds in a game, which is a lot. But as we got either as close to 50 or over 50 rebounds a game, that typically results in a win for us. And so that's pretty much been my number, my mark, that we tried to, as a team, to get as close to 50 rebounds a game, right? And so
Right.
there's two pieces to that. One is going to be from a defensive rebound perspective. We want that to be 30, 35, as close to 40 as possible. Because what that means is now we force you to go take bad shots. We've now hopefully translated that to, a rebound, a kick, and a bucket in transition, right? So a lot of times you can say that a good defensive rebound, if you start that transition the right way, you can get just almost as easy as a bucket as you would from a steal and a quick transition bucket from there, right? So really focusing on trying to get a high number of defensive rebounds, because ultimately that means that we had stops. And then on the offensive end, our goal typically with our programs is always to try to be in that 10 to 15 range offensive rebounds. I don't want that number to be extremely high, because that ultimately means we didn't shoot really well.
You're missing a lot of shots.
You're missing a lot of shots, but realistically, at the same time, on the women's side, especially looking at the high school ranks, and then depending on sometimes your program at the junior college ranks. I mean, yeah, your shooting percentages are almost just by nature going to be a little bit lower, and so if if our shooting percentage is going to be lower, well, then you better freaking go crash the glass and let's go make up for it, kind of thing. And so, obviously, the better shooting team that you got, a little bit less offensive rebounds you have. So now the challenge is going to be on the defense, back to the defensive end of let's get stops, let's get boards, and let's go run.
Mm.
So
So I am now curious as we kind of move on to kind of the next phase of this. Now, as a coach, I'm always kind of fascinated about how we kind of take this information and these numbers, right? You mentioned about like the 50 of the rebounds, and we take
yeah,
the things we chart, and I know some of the other ones you mentioned about deflections and charges, things that you find obviously
correct.
to be really important to your team. What do those um, conversations kind of look like with your players in terms of like making sure that they like understand the importance of those? Are you letting them know that, hey, these are like the ideal numbers that we're targeting and we're going
Yeah.
for? Is that not something that you worry about them worried about a specific number? How do you kind of take that importance that it has to you and your coaching staff and kind of, reiterate that and reinforce it with your players?
Definitely. No, yeah, we 100% have those specific conversations with the team. They definitely understand the importance behind it. I wouldn't say that they over focus on it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think that it's just kind of something that's ingrained into them, and even to the point of they know. So, for example, when we come into halftime and post game, I what I do is I always break the game down, each quarter. So I'll go ahead and I'll write up there, quarter one, two, three, four. I'll have a line next to it, and then that way, when the players, so players always go into the locker room first. Coaching staff hangs out and digresses a little bit, but the players have full autonomy to go up to the board, and they either put a a check, a question mark, or an X, and basically they understand that represents as a whole what our goals are. You know what I mean? Do they felt like we got after the boards? And of course, they don't really necessarily know specific numbers by the time, before we get in there, right? But the feeling
Yeah.
of it, did they feel like we attacked the boards like we were supposed to? Did we feel like we were, getting deflections like we expect us to, or charges, right? Did we get to the free throw line like we want to? And so they honestly, they take it and they run with it, and I love that part of it, because we want them to, for my program, we're a player centered program. They got an opportunity to give us as a ton of input, and I don't definitely, I definitely appreciate that, right? And so
Yeah.
for them to take the accountability, and they know when to put an X. You know what I mean? So they're not gonna come in and go into a halftime with 20 total rebounds and go put a check mark, like,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I mean? Like, they definitely
Right.
know, and so and then the nice part too is, like I said, with like even for them the ability to put like a question mark next to it, right? So that means that for us, the coaching staff, we walk in, girls got a question mark up there, coaches maybe walked in with the check mark, or maybe we walked in with the X in mind, and so now that gives us an opportunity to kind of break that down together, and then we look at our stat sheets, and we're able to explain, hey, you guys felt like there's a question mark. Okay, tell me what was the thoughts on that? And they're like, well, this or that. And then we can look at a stat sheet and go, okay, well, this is what we're working on. This is what our goal was. We're short of that, so maybe that was more of an X, or hey, heck, man, we exceeded that. And so you guys got to give yourself a little bit more credit. Things like that makes the conversation definitely
Hmm.
a lot more organic, a lot more easier, and hopefully them understanding why.
And I'm sure it's valuable for you as a coach to be able to get player input as well, because, for me as a coach, I've always found it to be really enlightening and really informative to me when something that I notice or something that I observe or something that I think is different than what my players see or what my players think. And I'm always like, I don't want there to be those disconnects. I would love, if we were always equal on, check marks and, the things that the X's and be in agreement on that, because that means we're seeing the same things. But I think as a
Yeah.
coach, it's also really eye-opening and informative when maybe you see things differently than your players do because, they're the ones playing. So you're the one coaching, you're the ones playing. You would love for them to be on the same page. But even when it's not, there's a lot that a coach can learn from, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, 100%, absolutely.
So now, when you have these things that are of importance to you, how does this now translate into what you're doing on the court? How are you able to, um, kind of make sure that what you're running on offense and what you're running on defense is going to lead to the outcomes that you're hoping to get with, like you said, the deflections, the charges, the other things that you
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah.
How are you able to kind of tailor that offense and defense to try and maximize the possibility that you're going to get those outcomes?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so for that part of it, right? I mean, like for example, I'm a big defensive coach.
Hmm.
In the programs that I've been in when I wasn't a head coach, I was almost. I think now that I think back on, I think every program I was the defensive coordinator. I mean, I love offense. Don't get me wrong, but defense is what really gets me going, and so for example, like with the deflection charges stats and things like that, those are big just because another thing that we focus on is we absolutely love as a program to keep the teams we play under their average points per game, and so right, so now all of a sudden by us working on those things and setting up our defense the way we do, and as high tempo as we do it. For example, this first year in with this team as a whole for the season, we consistently held every team that we played against under their scoring average,
Hmm.
and so like those things, like all right, hey, whether it was the fact that we were charting deflection and charges, maybe that's what it was, or maybe it was, again, we defensively for us, we kind of we switch it up a lot. So we'll go from full court man to man to three-quarter court trap to half court to zone. You know what I mean? And my players that come play for our program have to be ready for that. And we spend a good chunk of the off season and preseason doing a ton of defense. And so right, so you're gonna kind of tailor to what we're wanting to do, and I think by putting those details on. And focusing on those statistical categories is what's going to kind of match with what you're trying to do offensively or match what you're trying to do defensively. Same thing like I mentioned, offensively, we want to, in a perfect world, we want to be one of the more higher ranked teams in terms of free throw attempts per game, right? And
Hmm.
so what that means is that offensively, we're probably going to be shooting a little bit less 3-point attempts as the rest of the world likes to do right now. But if that ultimately puts us at the free throw line, puts them in foul trouble, stops the clock, lots of different things that I feel like puts an advantage on our table, is what we're gonna do, um, and even then, you look at, for example, sticking with like the free throw attempts, again, um, we're of the mindset that I'll be honest with you, especially in the women's game, less and less do I really want to call sets. I feel like we've gotten a little bit too complacent on the women's
Okay.
side with running plays and girls kind of getting to us and expecting to go from spot A to spot B and then to spot C because that's what coach told me to do. But right after you got to spot A, you had a wide open lane.
Hmm.
You know what I mean, to go attack the basket. But gosh darn it, I'm gonna run the play that coach told me to run, right? And so by putting the emphasis, I felt like on the free throw attempts, that's going to have my players in attack mode mentality. We want to push in transition. We want to go. I always say put a shoulder to a chin, right? And so get us to be aggressive, get us to be physical, and go finish a bucket easy, right? As opposed to kick the ball up, have a coach call a play, back the ball up, get everyone in their spots, and
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's we got to tailor to how we want to run it. So
So that process of doing that, of kind of, taking girls away from, running sets while also having them learn to adjust to the pace and the play style at the collegiate level. I mean, I can't imagine that is a quick
no,
process for players
it's
to
tough.
adjust and be ready for that, right?
I'm glad you pointed it out because no, it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
And so when you're, just to kind of follow up on that, then like is it's hard to put a a timetable on that sort of thing. So I imagine, to try and get them up to speed, there must be a constant emphasis. Is there a constant emphasis on, things like decision making and allowing players to, make mistakes and kind of remove some restraints for them in practices? How does that kind of translate into the things
Yeah,
that you're kind of putting into your practices?
that's the biggest one. What you just said right there was the restraint part of it, right? So, we when we do get to the offensive portion of our
Hmm.
of our preseason, and honestly even in regular season, uh, I'm again maybe I'm unorthodox or different or whatever have you, but no, my coaching staff knows right away. Like, yes, I mean there's going to be certain times where I tell you like let's get all the way through this motion so that way you can learn to see what's going to develop out of it. But no, when we go play, an action in, if I tell my players, if you've got something that you see, if I call one, right, let's just call it one. If I call one, and the moment that we're supposed to go that next action, but you see something different, oh man, you've got the full green light to go break off and do it. I'm not the type of coach that I'm going to chuck my chair across the court because you didn't run what I wanted to. And so, no. So the restraint part of it is where in the early stages, you'll get especially obviously in practice, you'll get the kind of the player slow look over the shoulder to me like coach, like I was supposed to run the play or do this, and then that's where it gives us again a talking point of if you feel like you've got the advantage at any given point, man, like don't hesitate. Like, because again, we want to get downhill, we want to get to the rim, or we want to get you to your one dribble pull up or whatever be the case. And so that part's the biggest challenge. There's no doubt about it. You know what I mean? And so um, I will say that even then too, right? Like being on the women's side, people ask me because one I did coach on the men's side very quickly before I realized I did want to be on the women's side. But I think specifically on the women's side, um, I equate it to the game of chess. I know some people have talked about it before, but like for me, the reason why I say that I feel like I was on the women's side, the game itself is much more easily. We're easily able to manipulate certain things. Versus on the men's side, what we just talked about, on the men's side, we're going to be able to have players that can break off a little bit easier, I think, than on the
Right.
women's side. You know what I mean? And so I felt like it's a little bit of a disservice to continue to just tell them to go from here to there to there to there, and start to challenge them and teach them how to see the floor, how to see, not even necessarily the defender that's in front of you, but your secondary defender. You know what I mean? And so we definitely spend a ton of time working on those and working on those reads, to get them better prepared and better individually.
Yeah, and as somebody who tries to do the same thing, I'm definitely not a big sets person. I'm definitely more in trying to allow my girls to, kind of understand the game, see the game, kind of have a
Yeah.
little bit more of that autonomy in their decision making. As a coach, I have to live with mistakes, right? I have to live
Oh,
with the fact that there's going to
yeah.
be a lot of mistakes and it's going to be messy. And, thinking back to what we just talked about with practices, I know a lot of my practices are really messy because there's a lot of mistakes
Mhm.
happening in my practice. But I would love for it to, always look great and everything to be going well. But I've had to kind of embrace and I think there's a lot of value. There's tremendous value in your practices being, filled with mistakes and filled with a lot of things that don't little look right or look great because in theory, right, practice should be for making all those mistakes and ironing all those things
Sure.
out and I think as we talked about, right, it's harder than the games themselves, and so hopefully the games have a lot less mistakes than those practices do.
Yeah, I mean, that's where, for us, when we kind of talk with players individually, right? So that's one of the bigger things. Obviously, a little bit more so specifically with our point guards, but even just our guards as a whole. We focus a lot on assist to turnover ratio with our guards. We want that to be a good ratio, just because that means that there's going to be a little bit less mess, right?
Mhm.
We talk about individually, shooting percentages, just because the lower the shooting percentage is, the more messy it's going to be, right? And so that's where individually we'll have a good conversation with them, and again, make sure they understand why. Well, why is having a good shooting percentage important? Why is having an assist to turnover ratio the way we want it to be? And I think that's an important thing, from whether you're coaching high school, and honestly, even Division 1. You know what I mean? I wanted to make sure that my players understood why I was having them do things, because I
Mhm.
think they understand why certain actions are, or certain movements are, and things like that. I think results in a little bit less mess, and I think that I felt like a lot of times players don't understand why. It's just, well, this is what coach told me to do, and so
Mhm. They just do it.
I just do it. I don't think about anything else. And so we spend. I'm not going to say we spend a lot of time on it, but it's definitely, if you come sit on my practices, yeah, at least once a practice, you're going to hear us, whether it be whole group, small group, individually. We'll definitely challenge our players into why. And earlier on in the season, we asked the question, okay, why do you think we want to do it this way? And it's real quiet. You know what I mean? And it's hard, especially, I know, like you mentioned, being a teacher. Again, I was a high school teacher for almost 10 years. I mean, it's easy to ask a question, and then when it gets quiet, like, you want to be quick to answer for them, but we'll have a lot of awkward silence, to force them to find an answer, find a solution. And I think that's an important piece too, that a lot of times coaches don't want to take time on doing, and definitely should, though.
Yeah, I definitely don't want robots, right? I definitely don't
Oh
want people
gosh,
who
yeah.
are just, reactive, right? I've taught teams that have been very reactive before in the past and we're always waiting on a direction or an order and a command of some sort, and I just realized in doing that just how slow my team always was because you could almost see them processing, you could almost see them thinking on the court and
Yeah.
instead of just playing. And I was like, oh man, we just look like we're just a step slower than everybody because we're just trying to think too much rather than just see what's actually happening on the court and making decisions and knowing why we're making those decisions for sure.
Yeah.
Um, those other things that you mentioned, I'm really curious, Coach, about like, things like rebounding, for example. Is that
Yeah.
something that can be, you know, emphasized in a practice? Are there things that can be like
Yes.
done to, really work on improving things like reboundings or taking charges or things like that? Or those things that can be, drilled or taught in practice? Or how do those skills kind of get developed within your players?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a little bit of a two-way street, in my opinion. I mean, listen, as much of an emphasis as we put on the rebounding, we definitely, don't get me wrong, we definitely do rebounding drills and things like that within our practice. And it's nothing crazy, you know. I mean, we'll do the typical, elbow, face up, and just working on those movements to the triangle, three offensive players, three defensive players, triangle, by the restricted area. We'll do those prototypical rebounding drills. Nothing. I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm not doing anything, unorthodox, if you will. But so when I say it's a two-way street, is one, yes, we definitely will work on those. We'll focus on those. We'll teach correct fundamentals. We'll work on explosiveness. But realistically,
Hmm.
for me and what I explain to my athletes is it's a choice, man. Like, you are either going to absolutely make a conscious decision to go rebound on a possession, and get in there and go do it. You know what I mean? And that's where, again, I'll go back to, even with the majority of my teams that I've coached, never been really huge. Even when we had a really successful high school team, our average height across the board was 5'8", and but we still would go dominate. And even fast forwarding to now, well, even then when I was coaching at the College of Idaho, we were 5'10", my two forwards were 5'10", but we were, for a good chunk of time, I mean, for NAI schools, we were top 50 in the country in rebounding. I mean, don't have to be huge. It's just a personal will to go get it done, and have that confidence in your players that they're going to buy into what you are wanting to do as a coach. And that's the hardest part, to go coach it, though, right? That you have zero control over
Right.
their individual determination to go get a freaking rebound. And
Yeah.
but I think, though, that kind of comes back to the fact of, your to the minor details of, what is your relationships with your players, what is
Hmm.
the atmosphere in your program. When you have a group of players that are willing to do what they need to do, you're going to find yourself a little bit more success. And so anyway, so we'll work on rebounding within practices and doing different drills. Honestly, it may sound elementary, not to take anything away from those amazing coaches at that level, but we'll do, on certain days or different drills and competitions, like, I'll challenge my team, like, hey, the ball, if you're doing a partner shooting and you're the partner that's rebounding, passing, that ball doesn't touch the ground. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah, 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 for
and,
sure.
and so it's simple. It's nothing, like I said, nothing crazy, nothing out there. But whether it's a make or a miss, and so that's kind of another point of emphasis we do. So if we're doing partner shooting, or if we're doing, even if we're going 5-on-0 full court, right? That ball doesn't touch the ground, and if it's a miss, it's an automatic putback. So we work on, and I'll give them different. I'll give them different cues on that. So, for example, like, we'll go, down the court this way. You're going to run, we'll run this action. And then if it's a miss, again, we've got, if we got four crashing the offensive board, one safety. And whoever gets it, it might be, I want you to go go get a putback before you come on before you lands. Right. So a little jump
Mm.
putback. Right.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then, depending on how that looks like, they might be getting 4 or 5 jump putbacks in a row. And, but no. And then the next trip down, it might be, hey, if it's a miss, then, I want you to, it's a grab and it's a pump fake to go finish. Just teaching them within those own drills, right? It's rebounding emphasis. It's putting them in the positions, and it's getting them different looks, as opposed to, oh, it's a miss and I grab it and there's no defense, so let me just kind of lazy, put it back. I just that's not harder than the game. A game is going to be tough to go get a putback, right? And so doing different things like that, I think is what sets them up hopefully for a little bit more success.
Well, even those things that you mentioned about like like the cleaning up misses and putbacks and stuff like that, it's kind of
Yeah.
a good way to work on, something like rebounding, which is an important thing that you stat without it
Yep.
having to be like explicit, like, okay, this is something specifically for offensive rebound. It's already kind of
Right.
built into something that you're already doing.
Exactly. And that's funny too, because as we progress through the season, for the new players that come into the program and learn, you know what I mean? Like, obviously they're high stress trying to make sure that ball doesn't hit the ground. The long rebounds have them moaning and grunting a little bit. But then, as we progress through the season, and maybe that practice or whatever, maybe that drill, I don't say anything about it. They're just instinctively like, their team is don't let the ball hit the
Don't
ground,
let it hit the
things
ground.
like
Yeah.
that, right? So then they're like, all right, cool, there you go. You know what I mean? And then we
Yeah.
translate that to the game, and they'll go and grab an offensive board and put it back, and they're run down the floor like, hey, no dribbles, no, because that's the other thing too. Sometimes we'll chart like, all right, hey, partner shooting, miss. No more. The ball can't hit the ground more than two dribbles, basically, right? And
Mhm.
so, and it's the same thing, and then we'll go same thing on a make. If it's on a make, if that ball goes to the hoop, it's zero touches on the ground, or it's I'll give you one touch today, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And so they're just in a habit of getting that ball, because that's the other part of it too, right? So if we're let's just say we go down and we're working on getting the ball quickly, into transition. So they make it. We want to get that ball out of the net. No, no, we don't want that ball touching the ground. We want to get it out of the net, get in the baseline, and get it in. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
all those things translate to what we are trying to do offensively, defensively, and kind of make it come full circle without them even realizing it before they know it.
You can like trick them into learning some of these skills for
Right.
right
Exactly. Yeah.
without
100%.
even saying, because but there's something I think to be said of like, hey, we're gonna go and do this like rebounding drill, and maybe your players aren't like, they're not too excited or not like
No. Yeah.
too up for it, but like to wove it into something that maybe they're really like amped for, really like to do, or like or something they're really interested in. It's like, I can work on all these different things, and we've
Yeah.
snuck this in, and you didn't even realize that we were working on it, sort of thing. So,
Exactly. That's the part where there's in my career, I could probably count on one hand the amount of players I've had that have just absolutely looked forward and loved doing a rebounding drill. I think that's
hmm
probably the same for a majority of us. It is what it is. It's a tough, physical, gritty thing, and players aren't always necessarily crazy about rebounding drills, because it does feel, it does. Even from me as a player, like I can relate it. I know it does feel awkward because you're whether you're doing it out of a coach pass back and forth to each other to a shot to go locate and box out and explode up, right? Like it's all kind of a little bit awkward and not necessarily always game like, but again, an important fundamental part of it. And so from them not being always necessarily thrilled to go do a rebounding drill to, I mean, knock on wood, but there's always the scare that someone's gonna, clip a chin or step on an ankle of just
yeah.
on doing a gosh darn rebounding drill, right? So there's always that a little bit, I think, in the back of some people's minds. And so, I mean, finding different ways to mix it in there without it being a deliberate rebounding drill, I think helps kind of spice things up a little bit.
Definitely. Coach, are you concerned, or do you focus at all on stats and things regarding the other team when you're doing your scouting or you're doing your game planning? What emphasis or attention do you play to some of the stats or things that the other team has? And if so, like what are the ones that you kind of, look at or zero in on, whether it's team stats or individual
Sure.
stats when game planning?
Yeah, I mean, so then the flip side of it for us is going to be, definitely, of course, my eyes go straight to rebounding. Since that's one of our biggest emphasis, I want to make sure that we won that battle. I absolutely hate losing rebound battles, is what we call them. We want to definitely, and then within that, again, we want to decrease their opportunities for offensive rebounds, which then obviously then translates an increase for our defensive rebounds. So for us, we don't like to give up more than 10 boards a game. That's kind of a stagnant number for us that doesn't change very much. And then from a team concept, we're looking at fast break points and second chance points. So both those things translate obviously for us, but for them it's fast break means that we gave the whatever we gave the ball up, or whatever be the case, right? So that's going to be turnovers for us. We want to keep those down. Second chance points again goes back to the offensive rebounding part. So lower the second chance points are meant the lower the offensive rebounds were for them, which means we achieved our goal for that game. Um, and and then I mean, and then the same thing, kind of on the opposite end, we want to definitely decrease their opportunities to get to the free throw line attempts.
Mm.
And so it's a lot of what we do. I mean, just because again, I felt like our recipe for wins would be the opposite of what we want to take away for them. And those are kind of maybe more specific for the opposing teams. And then of course, like I mentioned earlier, we're really big on being a defensive team, and so we don't necessarily per se focus on how much a team is scoring, but
Okay.
definitely as a coaching staff, post post game, next day kind of thing, we'll revisit that and see where we were at on that. And that's not necessarily something that we always talk with the team, with our team immediately, but it might be something that that next practice that we can talk about, or maybe we go a couple games and that's something that maybe works its way into our pregame talk of hey, we've been over the last 3 games we've held the last 3 opponents under their scoring average, and this is what we're doing, and things like that. Those all I think are important pieces to look at.
And so your conversations that you're having with your players, are you kind of inner like are you kind of mixing in the stats conversations along with like film? Like how do you kind of incorporate your players kind of learning from, you know, the information and learning from stats and learning from film? Are you kind of bringing them together, or are you kind of having them watch film and kind of learn from it like separately? What's kind of the relationship between, you know, the information that you're telling your players about, you know, here's what happened, here's all the stats from the game, and then also here's the film from the game? How do you kind of blend those together?
Yeah, so a little bit of both right there. We'll do when we do, whole team film breakdowns. When we revisit games, those are things that uh, that I'll definitely include. So actually, as I say this out loud now, I'm definitely lying to you. No, we do a lot of it. So
Yeah.
when we go, so whether it's a post game film review as a team, I'll have stats up, on the board, and we'll definitely talk about those. And then same thing as we prep for the next scouting report. Again, maybe you could make the argument that sometimes it's a bit too much information. I kind of probably have my own self arguments about that. I don't like to necessarily overload, but there's specific points in us talking about certain statistical things for players scouting report wise. And so the whole group, that's kind of how we break it down. And then same thing individually, so when we do individual film sessions, that's when we'll bring up what if there's a statistical category that we feel like maybe is either really good or unfortunately maybe possibly pretty bad. And
Mm.
we'll talk about why, again, going back to that why, right? So talk about
Yeah.
why those are important, that they remain good, or why it's important that we got to bring those numbers up or decrease them, right? And then we'll use the film to, so let's talk about, like, for example, if player X maybe her shooting percentage is a little bit lower, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll use that to show her, hey, okay, well, in this position, in this action here, maybe we felt like we could have gotten a better shot, and things like that. And so, no, I definitely, with my players in our program, we they're going to hear stats, probably, whether they like it or not.
Like it or not.
Yeah, it's just how I am as a coach, and it's kind of how I think, just as a result of me, I think my assistant coaches kind of uh, have adopted that same kind of mentality, and they know what I'm looking for, and then also, then, as a direct result, I think my players know what we're looking for, and so, yeah.
And as my last kind of follow-up question to this before we hit our concluding segment, I was wondering
Yeah.
for you personally, Coach, if there's ever, a struggle that you might have with what the stats say that your team is versus like what you see on the court. Has there ever been like a struggle of like, well, our stats say that this is what we are, and you are what your
Hmm.
stats are, but when I look at us on the court, I'm seeing X, Y, and Z, and so I've
Mm.
had situations like that before where I feel like, oh, we're right there, or like, we look like we're right where we need to be, but then the stats don't quite line up with that, and that's always been a bit of a head scratcher, something that I have to fight with. Is that something that you've ever gone through, and how do you kind of like, I guess reconcile that if your stats kind of maybe don't match up to really what you're seeing on the court?
Yeah, that's a good question. As you asked that, I was trying to rack my brain on anything I felt like stood out to me, and I don't, I don't know if I'd say that there was. I felt like we, I felt like, in my personal opinion, I felt like, especially, again, going back to the categories that we really do truthfully focus in on. I feel like it's always clear, right? So, like, if we lost the game, I feel like 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10,
Mm,
I'm gonna grab our stat sheet and head to the locker room and be able to look at and go, all right, this category is probably going to be too low. This category is going to be too low, or the turnover category is going to be too high. Like, I felt like those things kind of, dic I don't want to say dictate, but definitely are a piece of whether it was a loss or a win. I will say though, saying that out loud, I mean, there are times where um, where I get proven wrong, in the sense of, we um we lost a game, we lose a game or we win a game, and if it's a loss, but we come in with 56 rebounds. That's the part where I go, okay, I'm scratching my head, like, man, like, my formula again says, more times than not, you hit that 50 rebound mark on the women's side,
mm,
it's going to result in a win. And when you get that and it's a loss, that kind of leaves me a little bit dumbfounded sometimes, or on the flip side of it, we go get a win and we come back and it was a 28 rebounded night. It's like, man, like, I feel maybe we escaped that one. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like, I would love to see that number higher. And so I think that maybe that's how I'd answer that question of when those things, either you achieve your goal, but it wasn't the result that you wanted. Those kind of made me maybe leave myself a head scratching a little bit. But otherwise, I feel like it matches. I feel like my expectations are are usually met, good or bad, when we're coming into the locker room.
And I think that's a good point though about what you meant about sometimes like when you have a win, but you're not even hitting those metrics, like you can, have that conversation, right, with your team about like, hey, like, yeah, we won, but like we are definitely not playing like up to the level that we should be or what our expectations are, because you can refer back to those, metrics that you hit on earlier, and it's not just
Yeah,
you, saying it for, because you felt that way. It's like, no, here are our goals and we're not meeting them. And so even if we're winning and if we're not hitting those goals, we're still not performing up to expectations.
I think, I will say that this is probably, when you talk about being a statistical kind of, analytics style coach,
Hmm.
that those things can sometimes overshadow a little bit a win. And what I mean by that is when you get a win and maybe you were a little bit lower in the rebounding category than I wanted to, or maybe I felt like we
Sure.
didn't get to the free throw line like I want us to. It's easy to walk in and go, well, dang it, man, we didn't get our 50 rebounds. Like that was a loss of that goal, that challenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but man, hey, listen, it's so hard to win a game, and I don't want to necessarily let those things overshadow, but it's hard to not let those, again, for me being the stats guy like I've been in my whole career, it's hard not to walk to the locker room and go, dang it, man, we didn't get this category or we didn't get this category, and but then it's like, shoot, man, we'll take a win, let's go, and those will be some little conversations that we can touch on the next day. But let's go celebrate a win. Let's we're big on positive mindsets within our program, and we'll find a way to fix the small things.
definitely. Yeah, yeah. When it's always good to have a win, right? You don't want players feeling terrible with themselves
Right,
after a win, right?
right, 100%.
For sure. Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple of questions that I ask every guest, so I'll go ahead and start with this first one.
Okay.
Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing our listeners would be able to learn from?
Oof. Okay. So I, well, I did mention the why. I think that was a big one for us. But since I used that one, I'll try to find something else. I mean, thinking back on my career, I think and it's funny because I just had this conversation today with one of my players. But man, it's the relationship piece of it. It's really easy, especially at the college level. Obviously, maybe more specifically at the college level, but it's so easy to turn this into a business at this
Mhm.
level. And while it's important to have that mindset, whether you're a high school coach, a middle school, Division One, like you got to be able to have those relationships. This game has changed maybe more than some people want it to or will admit that it has. It was specifically within the players, and so having relationships with your athletes, more so than just tell him to go get 50 rebounds a game. It is such a big thing, and being able to take the time and relate and understand and uh, just being able to know who they are. I think goes so long. It goes so far for you. It goes so far for your program. And that's something that I really pride myself on. I think early on I realized that, and even more so, even within the coaching side of it, not necessarily with the players. It's so easy to get competitive maybe with your crosstown rival, or a conference opponent or things like that. But man, at the end of the day, this is a game like we all have heard and all tell our own players, right? Uh,
Hmm.
it's a game, and the fact that we each get an opportunity to make an impact on our student athletes' lives and families, and on ourselves, just to make everyone better. I think the relationship piece is a big reason why I do what I do. I'll be honest with you, and yeah, so I'd say the relationship piece, but first and foremost, like I said, I would include the why. Being able to teach and explain why, I think, is also a big part of it.
No, it's a great point that you mentioned, right? Especially when you get to the higher levels of coaching, right? That aspect of like the coaching business, and it's definitely
Yeah.
something I'm sure that you can really get lost into in a lot of the weeds of all that entails, and you never want to lose sight. I'm sure, as you mentioned, of the fact that we get to coach and get to be around the game that we love, and form these great relationships with our players, and keeping that in the forefront of our mind, and not getting sucked into all of the logistics and administrative and bureaucratic, business
Yeah.
side of things, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, again, like I said, whether you're coaching a 15-year-old high school kid to, I mean, I'll tell you, like the kids that I coached, I mean, kids, right? The young adults that I coached at the high level, like they want to do the same stuff that these younger kids do. Again, it might not necessarily be to the same extreme, like whether it's a small thing or a big thing, like man, that's what they want, and every kid that you talk to when you're recruiting tells you they want to be part of a family atmosphere,
Mm.
and so don't just be a coach that says, okay, yeah, that's what we are. Like, find a way to instill it, find a way to do it.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. I almost feel bad, Coach, because this is such a good point to leave off on. But I always like to give my guests what I like to call this 60-second soapbox. So hopefully, you have one more nugget that
Oh,
you don't
shoot.
mind sharing. But I like to use it as a platform for you to, get out like a final thought, a final idea, a closing message, something that you can leave the listeners with. You can take it any direction that you want, basketball wise or coaching wise, because it's your soapbox after all. So. Coach, if you don't mind, if you got one other thing you wouldn't mind sharing here, I'm going to go
Oh,
ahead and
boy.
open up the floor here and let you take it away one more time.
Okay, yeah, well, I felt like I just got off my soapbox
I
there,
know,
but
that's what I was like. All right, hope we got one more
but
left.
no, I mean, I would say, I will say this, because we do take it back to the very beginning when you asked about my journey. I would say that, especially for coaches that are listening, man, it is a journey. Whichever way you start, whichever way you go, and don't lose sight of just the kind of the grit that you have, and the hard work it takes. I mean, that's why I was so fortunate to go the route I did, from high school, having to fundraise, a ton of stuff, to, JUCO and NAI programs where everything is fundraised, and you've got two coaches that are expected to compete at a 4-year level. And so just, understand that it's a grind, and understand that it's what we love to do it, and it's about giving back to the kids. And we preach in our program about having, our student athletes have a great experience, and don't lose sight of that. Again, whether you're a high major D1 to, like I said, an elementary school team, like, it's about their experience that they have. The better experience they have, the more they're going to love the game of basketball, and the more, you get to give back. And that's, I think, the biggest part is, don't lose sight of your journey, don't lose sight of where you came from, and always give back. That's that servanthood mentality. I think that's an important thing for us as coaches, as adults, to give back, and to teach our student athletes that same mentality. So.
See, I knew you had another one in you. I knew you had something else that you had. No, that was great.
Yeah,
Coach, I really appreciate you coming on here talking about your program, your journey, stats, the things that you chart and your practices, and a whole other bunch of stuff that we got to touch on. It's really
definitely.
uh, fun to, hear and be able to exchange ideas from you, and hear about your coaching practices, and the statistics that matter, and just even what we ended on about the relationship building and not losing sight about, why we coach, and all of the reasons why it's such a privilege and an honor to be able to do this. So,
Definitely.
Coach Bingham, man, I hope things continue to go well. You get that full off season ahead of you here, and,
Oh,
and really
excited.
hit the ground running here with that full year under your belt. So,
Yeah.
best of luck going forward, and thank you again so much for coming on and talking to us.
Yeah. Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
And thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.